Greetings everybody around the world. It's time once again for Ancient Aliens Radio. This is the dedicated radio show for the cast of Ancient Aliens. Here we interview authors and researchers as an ongoing investigation into the ancient alien theory. Don't forget to like us on Facebook or subscribe to the YouTube channel Ancient Aliens Radio. Dr. Rita Louise is a returning guest, and if you haven't caught her previous show, I urge you to do so. It was one of my favorites today, one of my early shows as well. Dr. Rita's website is soulhealer.com. Dr. Rita Louise is a medical intuitive. She's also an author, a researcher, presenter, and what a fascinating character Dr. Rita is. Does her own radio show too, just like yours truly. She has Just Energy Radio. And we shall be meeting at the Paradigm Symposium next year. Dr. Rita has just been at the Paradigm Symposium, so I guess that's what the start for today's show is going to be all about. Without further ado, let's bring on today's guest. Hi, Rita.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me back. You know, I love talking to you.
It's great to talk to you again, Rita. It's great. I know you've had a tough year as well, and you know, things kind of change and evolve, and you know, you're grinding it out, Rita. You do the radio shows, you're presenting, you're doing conferences, you don't stop reading, you got like a dynamo.
Well, I can't even imagine not keeping busy all the time. I love my life, even though to other people I don't ever stop, but it is what it is.
It is what it is.
I don't know what I would do if I wasn't doing something.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like I mentioned, Rita, you know, you got the Just Energy Radio show. Great area of research for me too. You know, if I look for a guest sometimes, and it's like I like to get the female perspective. You bring a different viewpoint to the table as well, and you know, you ask great questions and great pertinent aspects. And I guess that's kind of what we're going to talk about today as well. That you bring something very, very different to the table today. We're going to talk about your latest documentary, iKon. That's small I, capital K-O-N, iKon, and it's about iconography, mythology, arts, through the ages, if you will. I guess, Rita, before we get into anything in depth, let's have a little chat about the Paradigm Symposium. You've just come back from there. It'd be great for me to just understand how you get on there and kind of catch up with what you've been doing.
Actually, I wasn't there this past year. I was there in 2012.
2012.
And I had met Scotty at a different conference, and we hit it off famously. And it was kind of like family. And it was just a wonderful opportunity. And then he invited me to come speak at the symposium and had a wonderful time, got to meet excellent people. Got to hang out with Eric von Däniken. That was very cool.
Wow.
And Laird Scranton and just a whole variety of people. You know, so there's the conference, but then there is the camaraderie that comes out of the conference. Not just with, you know, speaker to speaker, which is wonderful, but also with the people that participated at the event. It's mind-blowing, you know, when you can create, and I'm going to say, that kind of community with a group of people.
It is a community. It's a very, very different thing that Scotty and John are doing. Yes, it is a conference, but there is some sort of a camaraderie, and there's like an environment. It's like a little culture, if you will, and I love what these guys do, and I really do. You know, Scotty and John's been on the show a few times, and fascinating individuals in their own right as well. Again, same as yourself, really bringing something different to the table, you know, doing their own work, their own authorship, and, you know, and then providing the conference and the platform. So, yeah, and you're going to be speaking, Rita, at next year's Paradigm Symposium, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I will. Now I just have to figure out on what am I going to speak. I have so much material that an hour is just not even remotely enough time. To get it all out. Wow. And I keep adding to the collection of stuff that, you know, my little storage unit called a brain. So I'm thinking, you know, right at the moment, I'm thinking about talking about genetic manipulation in antiquity. Wow. That's what I'm thinking, but.
Here's a hot topic right there, Rita. There's a real hot little potato right there.
Well, it brings into so much stuff, you know, both GMOs today as well as what was going on back then that they can't explain. I love looking at things that scientists can't explain, because when you start looking at it, if you throw in the ancient alien potential, it takes something that is unexplainable and complicated and gives it a very simple and straightforward answer if you're open to going there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I had spoke to Ron Flemings before about the genetic manipulation of crops, at the very least crops, because you can measure how we seeded the wheat plantation and all that across different demographics and stuff. Did you ever watch the latest episodes with Giorgio Tsoukalos in Search of Aliens?
I don't have regular TV anymore. I just have Netflix. God. And so...
Well, the reason I ask is because...
That's because I'm always working, so no time for TV.
Well, the reason the reason I just ask is because of what you said about genetic manipulation. There was a stone he brought up on... in the south of Portugal. A researcher, Peter Daughtry, mentioned it in his book about Atlantis, and it looks to have the twisted serpent embossed on a stone in 4000 BC. This kind of menhir megalith, and we're going to get into what you mentioned in your documentary about megaliths and menhirs too. But yeah, this stone looks to have like this the Sumerian twisted serpent with the central bar running through it. Incredibly fascinating, Rita. So Rita, you've been on the show before talking about ET Chronicles, so this is not a stranger to the audience. You're talking about myths and legends. You have a very wide spectrum of looking at this problem, Rita, and it is a problem to historians, academics, if you will, because they have a very, very narrow focus, and that's fine. That's great for progressing. We need that. However, sometimes we need to sit back, take stock, and widen that spectrum and look at what has happened in the past and look for commonalities. Are you that person, Rita? Is that, would you define yourself as that person?
Apparently so. I really have, the ability to look at patterns and find similarities in things and take, if you give me a box of stuff that's just thrown in there, I can make order out of it. Just very intuitively, very naturally. And so it seems to be what I'm drawn to. When
I read your book, Rita, Man-Made, the Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, and you had assimilated all the data, Rita, and I looked at the mythology and the archetypes and all the stuff that through the ages, you gave something and you filled the gaps in for me, Rita. So that was great. I just want to let the listeners and the readers know that, that was great. Something very different in your documentary though, Rita, is to see it in video presentation. What a better way to see all this, than to display this in the documentary. I guess tell us the premise for iKon, deconstructing the archetypes of the ancients.
Well, when we talk about mythology, we're talking about an oral tradition. But we find these parallels. One of my big things is looking for parallels between cultures, and not just Greek and Roman or Egyptian and Sumerian, because they're geographically very close to each other. I like to look for these parallels with Australian and Native American, and throw in some Sumerian, and throw in some, Inca, and look for these parallels that are happening. And you can find them very clearly in mythology, but you can also find them in art. But you can't really write a book. You can write a book about art, but it has all of these pictures, and I felt like a better format and a better venue to present this information in a visual format was to use video. So I decided to put together the documentary. And actually, when I was putting this together, I had no text. I just had hundreds of pictures that I had collected over time and started organizing them, and the text came out of the images.
Wow. Fascinating. Like you say, deconstructing the archetypes of the ancients. That's exactly what you've done in the video presentation. You're deconstructing the archetypes of the ancients. I guess, maybe just for the listeners, tell us why myths, legends, arts, and traditions are all so important to us, and kind of maybe talk us through a bit of a journey of how that's happened through the last 20,000 years, 50,000 years, whatever, Rita.
Well, myth and legend tell our history, a lot of people say, well, they're fairy tales, but in my belief, they're not fairy tales. They're actually kind of historical documents, not documents, but historical recognitions or recollections of our history. And so I feel like it's really important that we pay attention to what they say because, people will say, oh, well, these stories are science fiction or they're just made up. But some of the earliest written stories that we have, the earliest written documents are these epic tales. The Ramayana is huge. I mean, it is 3 very long books. The Epic of Gilgamesh, yet another very long tale. And these were some of the earliest narratives that have come into the modern age. But why would someone write a fiction book? Why would someone document a Danielle Steele novel when they just basically got the art of writing in the first place? It doesn't make sense. What makes more sense is that they wrote down things that were very important to them that they wanted to get in stone and have move forward through the ages. And
yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate that, Rita, that the encoding of information that is important to you is the real driving force for writing something in stone. I mean, there's a lot of effort to put something in stone. I mean, there's an immense effort goes into this. And you're not going to just pick some trivial concept or something. It's got to be something really important to you.
Well, and one of the other things is, we named it iKon for iconography. And one of the things that we find in the artistic world is the use of iconography. Now, for the listeners that are not familiar with what iconography is,
sure.
Iconography is the use of a set of symbols that people will recognize. So, for example, if I talk about a gentleman and he has a big white beard and he wears a red suit with white trim and has this bag that he slings over his shoulder.
I know this guy. I know this guy, Rita.
You know him? So who would it be?
It'd be Santa Claus. I know this guy.
But see,
he's coming
even
soon.
from those few words,
I got you.
People recognize the symbol, and if you see the picture, you don't even need the words. And people know the story. People know who he is. They know that he only shows up on Christmas. He has a sleigh. He's got these reindeer. They know the whole story just from that one picture. And that use is that medium of information exchange has been in use for thousands of years.
This is quite different from what we're talking about then, an artistic style. The artistic style is obviously important too, Rita. Quite a different thing to what we're actually talking about, iconography. And iconography could be maybe then not necessarily artistically brilliant. Most likely it will be though, but it can encompass both aspects. Is that correct, Rita?
It doesn't have to be artistically brilliant. When you think of rock art, I mean, some rock art
crude
looks kind of juvenile.
Yeah.
But the people who recognize the symbols, it is part of their library, and so they could look at this thing and know what it is. Let me share a quick story. Sure. And this is before I got into, I was always kind of into this, but before I really started researching and writing, I was at Petroglyph National Park with my in-laws and my family. And there was this guy doing some research, and we just got chit-chatting. And he was talking about how the natives in that area told stories in the round. And so if you sat in certain areas, there would be a petroglyph here, and there would be a petroglyph on this rock, about 15 degrees away, and another petroglyph, kind of going around a circle. And he shared that they would go from petroglyph to petroglyph telling the story. This kind of like a mnemonic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so I thought that was really fascinating and imbues the power that symbols have for us. I mean, think about the Nike swoosh.
Sure.
The little whoosh
thing.
Yep. Everybody knows what that is.
For sure, Rita. Rita, we're really talking about reevaluating ancient art here. I know you talk about this in the documentary. This is incredibly important. How do we get through to the academics? Because I think a lot of quackademics, as John Anthony West would call them, which I love the term. I don't want to speak disparagingly of academics, but they are a genre. They are a breed of is it a brainwashing of this doctrine that they're, is imposed upon them, and it's like they're shackled, and their open mind is no longer allowed, and it's like, it's like, I feel like shaking some of these people. There's incredibly open-minded academics too, they're far and few between, really. How do we change these people? Do we have to? Do we just do something different, like provide different media like this presentation, iKon?
Well, I think that people that are not in the academic field are obviously coming forward, and people are listening to them, talking to the general public. But I think that academics are really shackled. There are individuals who have a belief in all of this stuff, but they can't publish, or they choose not to publish, because it's almost like the Inquisition. If you publish something that falls outside of the box, you become blackballed and a pariah to your chosen field. And so they're afraid. And that is just so sad, because we look to scientists to break ground and to put out the latest research, but they choose not to.
For sure. Rita, we share passion for the Venus figurines, for sure. I'm just so happy to see somebody doing something with these Venus figurines. There's not enough people talking about these things. I think these things are absolutely amazing artifacts, just for the time period alone. Now, there's other anomalies that you have put in the presentation, Rita, very, very pertinent to what you're exactly displaying, this whole iconography through the ages. And we're talking a very massive time span, but just on the sheer fact of how old these artifacts are, these Venus figurines, maybe just tell us a little bit about the Venus figurines, what they are, the time frames we're talking about, and why they're so important in iconography.
Well, I mean, the Venus figurines, the earliest ones, they estimate were created between 24 and 26,000 BC, which is ancient. And they are just these little sculptures, that you could put on your mantle. I mean, they're very small. They are portable art. How's that? Portable art.
Portable art.
And they represent this, I'm going to say, voluptuous female figure. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting is, why would they create them in the first place? And, they can't even come up with a good excuse for that. But James, what's fascinating is that the essence of this figure, these general characteristics,
sure,
kind of like Santa, you have a fat Santa, you have a skinny Santa, you have a
sure,
Santa that is wearing a Hawaiian shirt, but you still know it's Santa.
Sure.
Have been found from France all the way into Russia. Wow. So we're not even talking about a small population that are all creating these figures. If you just found them in France, okay, it was a cultural thing in France, but the distribution is massive.
Yeah, there's something like 100 plus, just for the listeners, there's like 100 plus of these Venus figurines. And like you say, the distance that these things are located, in time and in demographics is crazy. It just really begs answers. It really begs questions. And it really begs some serious academic research, which is largely ignoring this issue, really.
But there's also this, who is this person, and why were they making a figure of her? And a repeatable figure, because based on the way that the body is constructed, the way her hands are positioned, the way that the body, like, one of the things about these figures is, in many of them, they show her with this kind of like hair net or some kind of braiding or something going on with her hair. And that characteristic shows up in a large variety of them, again, that extend over this vast area. Mm-hmm. And so we're not talking about a bunch of different women images. We're talking about a very specific individual who has been represented over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Wow. And I think that takes it into a different category. It's not just a fertility goddess. That could be anybody, and it could look like anything. But this seems to be a very specific person. And James, I want to know what her story is. You know, and I hate going back to Santa, but, you know, it is the holiday season.
Yeah. We're very close now. We are very close now. It is the same, you know, Rita, it is the same person. That's the important thing. It's the same person for 20,000 years, Rita. This person is in existence for 20,000 years. And I'm like, you know, I feel like shaking people going, well, wake up, like, you know, can you not see this? You know, it's the same positioning of the hands. It's the same character of person displayed in an artistic, expression. It's mind-boggling, really. It's absolutely mind-boggling.
But like the Santa, it's like when we look at Santa, we know the Santa story. I would love to know her story.
Yeah. This is the archetype.
What did she represent? What was her importance? What was the narrative that goes around that representation? One of the things that's happened, not only from modern times, is that we've lost the story. We've lost the library. So we look at these figures and we think, But if there was the depth of the story, it would just change the whole thing.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Wow. You know, I seen a Venus figurine. I was with Klaus Donner for a Capricorn TV interview in Austria, and they have a Venus figurine in the Vienna Museum. I think it's the Natural History Museum. So I got to see one in person, really. And it's in its own glass cabinet. I mean, they have their own security guard. This thing is so valuable because it's so old and so rare. It's got its own security guard standing around it, like, just guarding it. It's like a personal bodyguard for the Venus figurine. But, and it's quite small. I mean, it's about the size of your hand, maybe smaller. And, it's just so artistic, really. And I say that because it's the time frame that this thing comes from. We're not supposed to think this is an artistic period. And I just want to drive the importance. I mean, let's mention the Paleolithic cave paintings too, which you mentioned, documentary. Great to see that too. Again, not enough people talking about this either, really. This is a time frame in history when we think we're cavemen, you know, and yes, the paintings are in the caves, but we have this stereotype of the caveman, you know, we're living off hunting animals and, you know, but there's very deep artistic expression. And like you say, it's not just artistic objects. There's a narrative there. There's an archetype. You know, what's the global commonality then, Rita? Let's talk about this, because if these Venus figurines, are we saying that this person existed? That this was Venus figurine, if this was a goddess, say? Because she's apparently a Venus goddess. And was she originally a goddess? Lay it on the line for me, Rita. Was she a goddess? Did she exist? Was she preserved in the mindset of the people? Who was she? What do you think this person was, Rita?
I mean, I think that she was, and I think that she was a supernatural, extraterrestrial individual. Mm-hmm. Wow. I wrote a piece that talks about ghost gods and myths. When we go back to one of the earliest documents, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
I'll have to think about this. Yes, the Epic of Gilgamesh. One of the things that they talk about, Enkidu is dying and he worries about becoming a ghost. And so that is our actually earliest representation or documentation of the concept of ghosts. So, you know, 2600 BC, when this tablet was actually carved, there was a clear understanding of the concept of ghosts. Now, we have no representations of ghosts or ghostly characters. We don't tell stories of specific ghosts, particularly. I mean, in the general character of things. But they're imaginary, quote unquote, because I do believe in ghosts. They're these supposedly imaginary characters that we've made up. Well, when you think about the gods, they also are these supposedly imaginary characters that we've made up. But think about the hundreds and thousands of representations that we have of the gods, but not the ghosts, other than, Casper or,
oh, sure.
Or Marley's ghost from A Christmas Carol.
Wow. I almost watched that yesterday, Rita, would you believe? I actually have it found online, and, I was going to watch a Christmas movie with the other half, but, I never got around to it. Perhaps I'll get there yet. But yeah, it's a great way to talk about this when you talk about archetypes that we are familiar with today. Why weren't they around in 30,000 BC? Why weren't we to have archetypes, Why did we suddenly just develop this, Why haven't we always been intelligent? This is the questions I ask, Rita. Why haven't we always been intelligent? Yeah, there is a line of 50,000 BC where we have this explosion of creativity. But even in our own doctrine today, we look back at that 50,000 years and we only give credit for the last 5,000. And it seems to be, we want to see a structure, we want to see a monument, we want to see, we want to see some sort of a technology blatant in our face to say, oh, that's high technology, that's okay. And sometimes not as easy as that. Sometimes things have been scrubbed from the record. We've had the flood as well, I think it's pretty much accepted now. Okay, Rita, the hands on the abdomen, okay, this intent that you talk about, and this way of displaying the knowledge, do you think that specific intent, could be carried through the ages? Do you think that the whole story could cover that demographic, and still be potent? Do you think, is that why the variations in style of these Venus figurines occur? Because the potency of the original story has been lost. How potent is that story going to be, at the end of the day?
Well, I mean, in the relatively modern world, we're talking about in recorded history, there are still, images of these fertility goddesses that still have, very similar characteristics to these items that were produced, 30,000 years ago. But what I find interesting with these Venus figures, and this is going to seem like such a nitpicky point, is that in some of the figures, the hands rest on top of the breast. And in some of the figures, the hands rest on the abdomen.
Sure.
And the question I ask is, are these trying to share different stories and different representations? And I'm going to kind of go in a weird, different way. In India, there is something that's called mudras. And a mudra is actually a hand position. And so kind of like a sign language almost, except not letters, but concepts, the concept of peace, the concept of tranquility. And by doing your hand, like, you do the little Vulcan, V thing between your fingers, and we all know, live long and prosper. That's what that hand symbol means.
Yeah.
And so take that idea of hand placement, hand positioning, and apply it to these figures. Were we getting a different element being associated with these figures because the hands were moved? I don't know, but it's a possibility because
it's a great question too, don't read it. It's a great question.
The images that I could find, it was kind of 50-50 on top and underneath. And so there wasn't necessarily, again, from what I could find, a prevalence of one over the other.
Yeah. Where does academia stand on this, Rita? Do they ignore this?
They don't even touch it.
They don't even touch it.
And I don't think they've ever thought to ask the question. One of the things that I didn't put in, iKon, deconstructing the archetypes of our ancients, and we were talking before the show about Sumerian, art and, cuneiform and all that good stuff. In a lot of Sumerian art where they show the priests and they're sitting down or whatever, and they always have their hands folded, it looks like. Are you following with me?
Sure, yeah.
But their hands really aren't crossed. It's like they're almost making a box with their hands. And I looked up at that that hand position, and that actually, and I don't remember what it was, but there is actually a mudra type hand position.
Really?
That is this box shape.
Wow. Wow.
And so were they giving further information? Was there a deeper representation, a deeper symbolism that is in those figures that they just say are, little priest guys? Again, the sad part is that we have lost the library. We have lost the code as to what it all means. And so it becomes just a thing.
We've lost so much, Rita. We've lost so much. We really, really have. Of course, you mentioned Göbekli Tepe on Easter Island. Again, very, very pertinent question you asked there, Rita. The hands on the abdomen. Again, these strange figures that we have. A great insight into that too, Rita. Tell us about the snowman, this snowman guy in Turkey. I think this guy is really interesting.
Yeah, and I would say his name, but it was too complicated. So I just, he's called the snowman. So I'm like, good, I can do the snowman.
Well, let's describe the snowman and why he looks like a snowman, basically.
Well, I mean, he is carved out of a white block of limestone, and he's about 6 foot tall, and it is so we have the Venus sculptures, which are, portable art. They will fit in your hand. You can carry them around. This is the oldest actual statue, being 6 foot tall, that has been excavated. It's dated to about 10,000 BC. Wow. And actually they were digging, the foundation for a bank when they found him.
Wow.
Yeah, just, an off chance thing. And where this figure was found was actually not far from Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, fascinating.
So that adds into even the dating of Göbekli Tepe in and of itself, is that there was something going on. And it makes you wonder, is this a representation of one of the gods that was present in Göbekli Tepe?
His face is unique, Rita, isn't it? He doesn't have like a mouth. He just it looks almost like a snowman who hasn't got his little mouth.
He just needs a carrot for a nose.
Yeah, there's a little carrot for the nose or something. Just needs finishing off. But very unique and very expressive as well. And look at the art at Göbekli Tepe as well, Rita. I mean, look at the time frame there. I mean, that place is like, it's unprecedented, really. 10,000 BC and that stuff's going on. Nobody expected that when it was dug up.
Well, and have you noticed that no one really wants to touch it?
Yeah, in the academic world, I mean, Klaus Schmidt.
They are, but it's like there's Göbekli Tepe, but they're not trying to integrate that into our history. It's just this anomaly that will be an anomaly and it will stay over there forever.
There was a great National Geographic article in one respect. However, they just tried to tie it in with the religion thing and the agricultural thing, and it's always the two questions that come up. And what I like about your iKon documentary is you develop a new way of conventional thinking, out of the box conventional thinking, I should say, and they help people just do that. It's a nice display of knowledge and insight and perspective, and that's what we need. We don't have that in Göbekli Tepe, Rita. We definitely don't.
Actually, I'm working on a piece right now, an article right now, as we speak.
Wow.
Article right now about why they buried Göbekli Tepe.
That's one
and it's coming from a totally out of the box perspective, but is looking at it from what was the cultural norm in ancient and indigenous cultures. And I actually, I've shared it with a couple of people, and they just kind of looked at me like I was really weird. But anyway, I'm going to share it with your listeners, so you're all going to get a little heads up on this.
Please do.
So my feeling is that the site was considered taboo. And I'm saying that because in indigenous cultures, if something was sacred, if it was a place that a god or a king walked, that ground became sacred. If it was his cup, the cup became sacred and you couldn't touch it. You couldn't interact with it. And I feel like that site was so sacred.
Wow.
That in order to keep people from going on the property and becoming taboo, because it's like an infection, they buried it.
a misnomer that people throw out, and I don't like this now, and I agree with you, Rita, I really like your theory much better. Some people say it was decommissioned. However, if you're going to decommission something, backfilling a mountain in to cover up what you did is a really, really long process to decommission. The reason they say that is because some megalithic sites like Gavarnie, in France, they seal the chamber up. That's okay. That's decommissioning. That's an easy thing to do. I understand where that kind of philosophy comes from. Don't get me wrong. I understand it. However, to backfill a mountain in like a Göbekli Tepe, I mean, there was a very big reason for that. And I think decommissioning it doesn't really hold water. It's a very arduous task to backfill the whole mountain and to cover up a Göbekli Tepe. For something like
But why would they decommission something if it wasn't something either important or it did something? I mean, if it was a mechanical device, then you decommission it. But if it's not a mechanical device, then how do you decommission a city?
And that's why I say the chambers are almost a mechanical device, because you have a doorway and a tunnel to go down to the chamber. It blocking off the tunnel. You're blocking off you're decommissioning it. How can you decommission stone circles? I mean, you can't. They're open to the elements or whatever. So the only way you're going to stop people going there is to backfill the whole thing in. And like you say, you need a bigger motive for that. The taboo thing, I like, Rita. Definitely. I definitely like that. That's again your knowledge into sacred sites and sacred, cultures and stuff like that, Rita. Again, good point to probably bring in, the winged disc as well, Rita. I mean, you've provided a wealth of information on the winged disc in the documentary too, Rita. To name a couple, the Aztec winged disc. What is going on with this, Rita?
The Aztec one?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, the one from
it looks like it looks like a Ahura Mazda from the Zoroastrian tradition. It looks like Middle Eastern. It's like, why are these two things like exactly representing the same thing, Rita?
Well, it was that image that got me started on this whole thing.
Really?
Because I was just blown away. So let's give your listeners just a little bit of background.
Sure, please.
So in Sumerian art, there is the images. I'm sure if they've watched Ancient Aliens, they've seen it. And there's the flying god, and the wing with the wings in a lot of the different pieces of artwork. And that is usually an image of Ashur in the little flying chariot that they say, oh, he's an alien in a spaceship.
Sure.
And so in, the Codex Barbonicus, which is an Aztec manuscript, there's this one image, and it has, Quetzalcoatl on one side and his brother on the other side of this image. But when you look at the placement of and then above them, in the center, is this, looks, from a very non-cool person, academic perspective, they would probably say it was some kind of a feathered shield. But if you take a step back, it looks like a winged disc. And if you take the Sumerian representation, where there's either the two fishmen or two people standing in front, on side by side of the tree of life, and then you have Ashur flying over the top, and you take this image and hold them side by side, they are really pretty identical images. In the Sumerian one, they actually show a representation, what they term the tree of life, which was what gave people life, brought people to life. And in the Aztec one, he's holding an infant, which is also a representation of the giving of life and their role as the gods that gave life. And so symbolically from the message, because this is all about what is the message. The message is really the same.
Wow. It's so insightful, Rita. It really is so insightful, and I'm totally mind blown by that aspect, Rita. Totally mind blowing. Again,
don't you love that picture though? I mean, I saw it and I was like,
yeah, I couldn't.
Down.
Yeah, I couldn't get my head around it. I'm like going, because I just have been so brainwashed with this Zoroastrian stuff from all the TV and documentaries and stuff. I'm like, oh my god, it's not hard to recognize, Rita. It's just not hard to recognize something that you're just looking at all the time. And the only problem is it's in the Aztec culture. It's in the wrong culture. Oh, panic. What's going on? This isn't true. But, it's well documented.
But if you think about it, if we have the same myths, or basically the same myths being found in Sumeria as well as with the Aztecs, or parallel stories, then it would only make sense that the way they represent it is going to be similar.
For sure. I was talking to Rand Flemmers before, and he's telling me that the Sumerians had a debilitating genetic disease, and it's the same as the debilitating genetic disease that occurs in northwest Canada, to a group of people up there. Same genetic blood group as well. There's so many commonalities. They're same. They have even some linguistic evidence the same as well. I have no doubt there was maybe cross-cultural contact in ancient times on a global scale. Again, I always need to find that resource, Rita, why this story or this archetype, these logos that are appearing all over the globe. And you've pointed out so many global commonalities. I need to see reason why, and I think there is tangible evidence there. I think perhaps, ancient, if you don't want to go the ancient alien route, there's at least evidence for ancient seafaring races. I mean,
minimally.
Exactly, Rita, minimally. At least accept that. And then you can talk about ancient aliens. If you don't want to go the ancient alien route, can you at least accept the ancient seafaring stuff? Because there's evidence for that too. But it's just like there's this wall up, Rita. I like this out of the box conventional thinking, Rita. I think this is probably the way to go, is to get DVD presentations like this, Rita, out there where you can display exactly what your concept is and say, look at these archetypes. These are the same. This is a global problem here, Tell us
and just one comment on what you said. If we're talking about an ancient seafaring tradition, we are also talking about, a group of Vikings, we'll say Vikings, come to the New World and spend a little bit of time. We have this handful of people. Are we saying that their appearance has such an impact that the indigenous population are going to pick up their religious tradition? I don't think it's likely.
Sure. I don't think it's likely either. Definitely not. I think the little, I don't want to speak derogatory of the Sumerians, but the little purse that they have, this strange little artifact in the drawing. And I've been in the British Museum many times, Rita, going there.
Well, that's because they have everything from the whole entire world, and you don't need to go anywhere but the British Museum.
I know, I get to go at least once a month. I love the place, and, every time I go there, I see something different, but I'm always drawn to the Sumerian stuff. I've been there probably more than anything. I keep finding it fascinating, these strange little purses that they have. They look like something you would, like what we would call a wallet or a purse with a little strap on it. I wasn't even aware, Rita, that these are encompassed in other cultures as well, and you point that out too. Maybe tell people about this little purse as well, Rita. It's synonymous with a lot of cultures, Rita.
Well, and we don't know what they were or what they were for, but if you look at Sumerian art, especially these ones that have the representation of the tree of life, the people that are facing it have these little bags. They have something in their hand. And so when you go, and actually there is the very first representation, or the oldest representation that we have of the flying serpent. Okay, so not Quetzalcoatl, because that name is Mayan or Aztec. This is actually an Olmec representation, so it's older, just a feathered serpent. And the person that's in there, it's a serpent, and he looks like he's inside the belly of the serpent, and he's holding one of these purse things in kind of the same hand position as these other images. So I thought that was weird enough to start off with. But then they have actually found carved representations of these bags. And they're kind of like designer style. They have, different,
for sure.
They have different kinds of bling on them. And Have you actually seen, let me ask you this question. Have you actually seen the carvings of these little purse-like artifacts?
In Sumerian? Or?
In the British Museum or anywhere. I mean, I've only found, I'm an internet junkie. I've only found pictures
I've seen them in the flesh, as they say. I've seen them, the whole walls of the bas reliefs they have are riddled with it. I just find them incredible.
Well, and my question is, because I only have images, is one, what are they made of? And how big are they? Because it's really challenging to tell, from pictures, are they the size of the purse? Are they proportional to these pictures?
They're like a life-size purse, really. It would be like a life-size purse if you will.
Okay.
For sure. Another thing somebody pointed out to me was that the Sumerians, they seem to wear these little straps around their bicep. These, what you would call like a prayer strap or an incantation or some sort of a spell or something. These little straps that are like a leather strap bound around with little bits of writing on it. Does any Sumerian author talk about this stuff? The most obvious, repeated iconography, if you wanted, in all these pictures, just within the Sumerian dominion. It's, there's nobody talking about this stuff. It's like they go, this was found at this place, it was found in this way, and this is what we believe who built it, and it's like all this, forgive me for male-dominated dogma, that it's like a historical account of what we perceive it to be, and rather than actually philosophizing about some of the detail of the art. It's like you're not allowed. Oh, you're not a Sumerian researcher. You didn't do your PhD in Sumerian, and there only is a handful of people in the world that really research this stuff in an academic sense. But like I say, really, nobody seems to talk about the artistic expression.
Well, and then they try to take this material and stuff it into a Judeo-Christian box, and it doesn't work. Yeah. They don't want to get into the minds of the makers in the first place. And what are they trying to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are they trying to say? That's a very good question, Rita. Rita, let's talk about...
not that I know, but,
For sure. Rita, let's talk about snakes and dragons. This would probably be an easy one. Snakes and dragons, right up to the Habsburg Empire. If you go into the Habsburg Museum in Austria, there's like secret societies all using the serpent there, serpents eating babies and everything, the Omphalos stone in Greece. Everywhere you look, Rita, you've got serpents. Again, this is a massive archetype. I think this is probably a good one to mention for the audience.
Yeah, they are everywhere. And what's interesting is that, there's always this battle. The part that I find interesting is that there's always this battle between the sky gods and these serpent deities or these serpent gods. And it doesn't really matter what culture you go to, you find the same story, you find the same narrative. But they're often associated with gods. Either they are half man, half snake, or they are holding snakes, or something with snakes. But but there's this battle of conquest and submission. We've been talking about the symbolism and the iconography. And what I find interesting is that we find these representations. Okay, so my belief is that the serpent gods were actually the earlier gods here on Earth, and that there was a battle for planet Earth by these sky gods, and the sky gods won, and the serpent gods were demonized or vilified and became submissive, or they, went down into the earth. We all know about that.
Sure.
But there are a lot of representations of gods being on top of, holding, stepping on, thus being victorious over this serpent and showing this submission. So we have Vishnu lying on Shisha, in a very relaxed position, but, so Shisha is this bed, and it has Vishnu being, in charge. We have even in the Catholic faith, we have Mary stepping on a bunch of serpents, showing her, the overpowering of evil by her son. We have Viracocha stepping on serpents, overpowering that god. And so there is, and I feel like we get, we know the story sort of from these, although no one wants to talk about the connection between this ancient war that happened and this concept of submission. We don't want to talk about that.
That's the thing, really. That's the thing. It's a very accurate portrayal. It was an ancient war. The serpents lost out, and it was about knowledge and truth being suppressed, and the submission aspect as well. I think probably the best in my part of the world over in Ireland, the Celtic art is a lot of serpentine expression in it, and Cernunnos, probably the best known example in Celtic art. He literally is holding a serpent in his left hand, a torque in the right hand, and the snake or the serpent in the left hand by the neck, strangling him almost, like choking him, like, I've got you, and it's the exact same thing. It's always like, we have control now. We have you. We own you. Like, it's bizarre. It really is bizarre. And like I say, so many people don't want to touch this. It's, who says our history is supposed to be nicely, neatly laid out, Rita? Who says it's supposed to be, simple instead of complex? I think the world is more fascinating than you could possibly imagine. I really do. The more I live on this planet, the more I get older, the more I read, the more I research, the more fascinating, the more varied and complex I find it. Rita, I want you to just, we're coming to the top of the hour. I just want to mention your website again one more time if you could, and tell us where we can get a copy of the documentary and your book as well, E.T. Chronicles.
Okay. My website is www.soulhealer.com. That's soulhealer.com. iKon, the Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients, is available for digital download on Amazon.com. So there's a link on the website, but if you go to Amazon.com, it's a whole $1.99. So it's a bargain at any price. And you can get, the download it, like there's the download that you can view it on your TV or your computer, rent it, like digital download to rent. And then there is, you can digital download it to keep, and we're working on actually getting it in a DVD format, but I don't have DVDs yet. And then E.T. Chronicles is also available on Amazon.com. You can come to soulhealer.com. Any book that I send out always comes autographed, so that's priceless right there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're still doing radio, Rita? Yeah? Just Energy
I
Radio?
am still doing Just Energy Radio Thursday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. www.justenergyradio.com. And actually, in a couple of weeks, we will be celebrating our 8-year anniversary, James.
8 years, Rita. Wow, you're a veteran.
8 years.
You're a veteran of radio, Rita. I've got a 2-year birthday this Christmas, December 29th. Capricorn Radio is, 2 years old. But I'm happy with myself. I met wonderful people like you, Rita. I really did. I did it for all the wrong reasons. I was curious. I was just interested in some megalithic authors and, very focused at the start, and, I just grew from there, Rita. And I think radio, as an author, I think radio is a wonderful way to connect with people. It's a wonderful way to explore knowledge. And it's a wonderful way to talk and philosophize, Rita. And I know you and Scotty and John at the Paradigm Symposium, we're all going to meet next year. And I just think there's a good handful of authors out there, Rita, that does this. It's like a service you do, but you get it back. And I love what you do with Just Energy Radio. You got a great welcome, of guests there. Just to wrap up, Rita, I'm a megalithic guy as well. I got to mention the megaliths, So, again, you mentioned this in the documentary too. What is going on with megaliths? I'm glad you pointed this in and brought this in too. The scale of the megalithic civilization, I think it's just mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing. The dolmens, the menhirs, at one point in Western Europe, this place was just dominated with stuff. I think there may be a link there with the serpent cults as well. But let me just talk a little bit about megaliths for the moment and what we've really lost there, Rita, in the archetype.
Oh, very much. We've lost so much. And actually, I've been reading this one book, and he brings in a very interesting point. Mm-hmm. According to him, in his research of indigenous culture, because I believe and he believes, and I think a lot of people believe, if we find things in indigenous cultures, we were there at some point in time. And his comment is that one of the things they would do was that they would take the blood of the sacrificial animal, the sacrificial victim, and put it on the megalith, not the dolmen per se, but mm-hmm. the standing stones, mm-hmm. in order to connect with the gods.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept, but I think way back, it was kind of like, that is what they did to call the gods. Like you see a spy movie and they put the X on the wall and then they walk away and then they get the phone call later that night. I think that was their way of having the gods come into their presence, but we've lost that. Mm-hmm. Now it just becomes some weird ritual that we do, and yeah. So we've lost what the real implication of why we're doing it in the first place.
Do you think that's probably where we're at today in humanity, that we have all these strange, weird rituals? I don't want to make fun of religion either, but there are religious doctrines that encompass a lot of ritual behavior. And it's like, do we even understand what the original concept was? Is it being either, I'm trying to be politically correct here, either bastardized into some strange ritual, or has it been manipulated through the fabric of time and for no bad deed, and just, it's just recycled out the other end as some strange behavior that nobody really understands? Is that where humanity is, Rita?
Kinda. I think that we have really lost the essence of what it is, what we're doing. I mean, even if we just take the concept of a temple, mm-hmm. A temple is the home of the gods, mm-hmm. Or a god. And so if the god actually appeared there, if this extraterrestrial, like the Venus fertility goddess actually appeared there, but now she's not showing up anymore. So could this culture have made an effigy of her to represent her when she's not there? And now instead of worshiping the goddess, we're worshiping the statue. And mm-hmm. the rituals that we actually did to have the fertility goddess show up, now we're just doing it to this piece of rock. And so there's just this total disconnect, but we're still doing it.
Yeah. It's funny, you just sparked my memory, Rita. I was in Brittany recently, and I've been to the big tall men here, the biggest one in the world, some 350 tons or whatever it was when it once stood, but it had a picture of a whale on it as well. It's something, I'm Mr. Astronomy, I don't really think about this stuff too much, but again, the showing serpents on the art in Gavrini in France as well. It's like, we just really, this is the one pertinent question, the archetypes and the myths and the legends that we really, it's where the research is at now, Rita, for me as well. I love what you do. I really do, Rita.
Thank you.
You have a fresh perspective on it. You have a fresh perspective on it, and we need it. I mean, it's a stagnant field out there. I mean, I'm like, wake up, people. There's plenty of research to be done. And you've definitely done that. Just for the listeners again, it's iKon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients. Download a copy of this. It's really interesting, really fascinating. Some great new stuff in there, and great to see you tackling some of this stuff, Rita. It really is. It's digestible, and it's really done in a wonderful, it's a wonderful matrix of interesting knowledge, and it's nicely woven together. I can see why you've done this, Rita, especially when you've seen that art. I can totally get it. I mean, I was gobsmacked when I seen that Aztec art. I mean, you just gotta look at it for that and see the connections. But again, Rita, I just want to mention your book. You also have E.T. Chronicles, What Myths and Legends Tell Us About Human Origins. Fascinating book, Rita. Keep going what you're doing. I love what you do. And I will be seeing you at the Paradigm Symposium next year for
Yay!
Sure. You take care, Rita. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, James. Bye, everybody.